everyone. Welcome back to the Railroad, the Union Pacific Railroad Evanston subdivision in HO Scale. My name is Darrell Cruz, owner and builder of the layout, and your host for episode 44 of season 2024. Apologize for this being a day late. I usually post these on Sundays. Today is Monday. But my wife and I were at the hospital all day yesterday with her mother, my mother-in-law, who's 90 years old and was having some difficulties breathing and so forth. So we were with her yesterday. If you are so inclined, please keep her and her family in your prayers as we go through this difficult time together. I'm hoping to get some work done again this week, but I may not be able to with Thanksgiving, and we may be back and forth to the hospital and so forth. So, again, keep her and her family in your prayers. Would be much appreciated. So a big part of what I completed this week was installing bridges. This is a trestle bridge that is going to go across the Weber River and connects Wholesome cement with the Evanston sub. Definitely a lot of switching that takes place here. This is a Walthers kit that was pretty easy to assemble. It actually makes a bridge that's probably at least over 2 feet in length. This turned out for this application to be 21 inches. And the biggest thing after getting it completed, putting it together is pretty straightforward. But some things that are a little bit more difficult is getting it placed properly and then cutting the timbers to the correct length to match up with the riverbed, with the road, and with the landforms as they go through. Now you notice there is a little span there for the road where you have double timbers and then a little bit thicker a span between the timbers, you can see. And the kit allows for having 2 of these spans like this. And so you see it's a little bit thicker timber there, double timbers going down to the river. But I put it in here upside down to figure out where exactly I was going to cut the timbers for each location. So I ended up cutting it. I was trying to also figure in the thickness of the track there, so I ended up cutting this right below that cross the horizontal timber. And then I had to come up with another method for figuring out how long to make the timbers that go down to the riverbed. Now you can see I do have the timbers cut for where it hits the road. For this here, I couldn't fit the bridge down in there, so I just built a small piece from the leftovers, and then just kind of figured in, okay, how far down was I going to have to cut each one. And this is not exactly it is downgrade a little bit, so the ones on the left would need to be cut a little bit longer than the ones on the right as it goes downhill. So it took me a while to just kind of look at everything, figure everything out, and try to decide, okay, how's this all going to fit? I had to not only figure out how far to cut the timbers, but also where exactly to cut the wood so that the bridge would fit in there. So a lot of just fiddling around and just kind of figuring things out and trying to decide how exactly it was going to work. You see, I did, in fact, cut out the piece of wood that was in there temporarily, and then the bridge was needing to fit in here. So this is the initial fit, and as you can see, it's not level at all, which is kind of what I wanted. I definitely wanted to err on the side of the timbers being too long rather than being too short, because you can't uncut very well. So you can see this is definitely not level. That timber, the double timbers that hit on the road definitely are too long. So I had kind of I didn't want to cut the horizontal timber completely, but I wanted to lower it to kind of match. So if I cut it above the horizontal timber, that was going to be a little too far. And if I cut it right now where it is right now, it's too long. So I decided I was going to use this little sander on my Dremel tool and just sand off what needed to be sanded off. So as you can see on the one to the right of it, as you can see, I did finally get everything pretty well level. I did have to cut off the timber, the horizontal timber, pretty much on the one on the right, but was able to keep it for the one on the left. So that took a lot of fiddling around to get all those timbers to hit right for that bridge. Now I needed, of course, for the mainline bridge, I needed to have some bridge track in there. So I was using, this is Micro Engineering bridge track. It comes in 36-inch lengths, and this bridge is actually 34 inches long, so it definitely is long enough. The kit comes with these timbers that are required for gluing on the ends of the timbers. But before I did that, I wanted to make sure that I got these tracks exactly straight. So I used my T-square and put the tracks up against it and just messed around with it until I got it as straight as possible. Then another thing I needed to do is the piers. If you remember from last week, I just had some scrap wood cut for the piers. I did get the piers cut on my miter saw, and I did purchase a 80-tooth blade, which cuts at a much finer cut than what the normal 40-tooth blade was. So you can see it cut it very smoothly through here. And I ended up using the double track pier and then the single track pier. And together they make up a pier that's about just over 8 inches, between 8 inches and 8.5 inches in width or length, however you want to describe that. And then I was going to just glue them together. I did ended up painting them also. And I cut them according to the wood piers that I had taken some time to make sure that they were cut the right height and everything. So I used those as a guide to cut these. So it went pretty quickly. With being a miter saw, I was able to get the cuts nice and vertical so that they matched up real well. And we were ready to go. So you see I have the timber bridge in there, the trestle bridge, I should say, and everything. I also wanted to make sure I got the turnout motor installed there before I start doing all the scenery. I also wanted this riverbed to match up a little bit better with the river in the picture. So I cut a piece of wood to fit and put a little bit of angle on it and some glue and got that to fit in there as perfectly as possible. Whoa. This is what happens when you try to do it one-handed. I need to get a video crew. Oh well, it worked out. Now you notice on the left-hand side it doesn't match up perfectly, but when you put the ground form in there, it actually goes from the existing riverbed up to that trees there, and so it actually matches up just perfectly. Actually works out real well. All right, so we're ready to go with putting in all the landforms. I have all the timbers cut to the right length to match up with where I was estimating the landforms to be. So I was ready to go ahead and put in some more cardboard forms. The bit of scenery that's going to go from the main line to the edge of the fascia is pretty narrow, so it's almost completely cardboard. Probably won't worry about putting any paper there. Now here for this pier there, I'm going to actually put some styrene along there to make the a concrete foundation for the main line that goes out, juts out a little bit from the landform. All right, so here we have the bridge back in place. You notice I did paint the other one silver to match the prototype. And what I'm doing here is putting everything in a position, getting everything as straight as possible. And then once it was exactly where I wanted it to be, then I glued the pier to the plywood. And I needed to do that before I did any more of the landforms here. You notice I did put some more cardboard around there. I do have the switch motor in there also, you notice. But for the landforms around this bridge, the landforms were actually going to come up to the pier. So a lot of these piers are going to be buried underground. So before I did any landforming with the cardboard around the mainline bridge, I needed to get the piers in exactly where they're supposed to go and then glued down so that I could then attach cardboard to the bridge pier. So you can see the landform, by the way, there by where the river hits the backdrop, so it ends up matching pretty well. So the river looks pretty good from most angles. When you get at a really far angle, it looks a little cattywampus. But from most angles, and you'll be watching the trains here, so you won't really notice how it being that way. All right, so here the piers are glued down, so I was able to go ahead and start gluing the landforms, the cardboard, onto the piers. And I wanted to make sure that they lined up so you had a slope going from the abutment to the pier and then down to the riverbed. By the way, this whole area on the prototype flooded when we were there in, let's see, I think it was 22. No, I take it back, it was 23. We were there in May of 23. They had some flooding. And didn't really affect the railroad bridge, but the highway bridge here got wiped out completely. And they had to rebuild it. So I'm going to put it in as pre-flood. But here's how all the landforms look right now. This is as far as I got. You notice I also did some adjusting on this landform that goes from the spur up to the backdrop. I wanted to put it more horizontal as it hit the backdrop, so you kind of have the idea that the hill will go down. And so made that adjustment. And then all the cardboard. There's going to be some styrene used here also for this abutment. And then also for this abutment. So before I start putting scenery, I'm going to put in some styrene in there for concrete abutments. And then you can see I have the all the landforms in and ready to go. There's also going to be some styrene going on next to the highway. You notice there's a little space there where there's nothing. There's going to be styrene there, and it's going to be like a rock wall there. You can see I do have the turnout installed and ready to go. So that works. Definitely wanted to get that done before put the Landform cardboard in there. But this is how it looks. So I was really happy with what I got done this week. It's ready for some plaster and some paint and ground foam. It's going to look pretty good. I was really happy the way this is coming together. It took a lot of fiddling around the riverbed and the bridges and so forth, getting everything to line up correctly, and definitely turned out pretty nice. We'll see how it looks in a couple weeks. Hopefully I'll get some plaster on this week. I'm not really sure if I'll get much done at all. I have an operating session on Saturday, so I'll be preparing for that also. So between going to the hospital for my mother-in-law and getting ready for the op session on Saturday, not sure if I'll get much work done on the railroad, but we'll see. I'll try and do what I can. All right, wanted to just do some switching here. This is a pretty interesting switching operation here at Wholesome. This is going to be a much abbreviated example of switching that the operator gets to do here at Wholesome. So you have a control point here, and then part of the control point, but actually outside of it, you have a little siding here where trains, Union Pacific trains, can drop off and pick up cars. So these are 3 cars that were dropped off recently by a Union Pacific train, and they, of course, the trains drop off empties and pick up loads. So these are all empties. So we'll just right now just go ahead and put them down at the Wholesome cement facility, and then we'll take some loaded cars and put them here on the siding track to be picked up. So all the turnouts are thrown with push button controls. When you're operating the Wholesome switcher here, you do not or you are not able to control any of the crossovers on the main line. In fact, none of the turnouts that are inside the control point and controlled by the signals, none of them can be accessed by anybody working the Wholesome switcher. So here we have the Wholesome switcher taking these empties down to Wholesome cement while a tank car train, a crude oil tank car train, heads westbound towards Ogden across the Wholesome River. Looks pretty cool going across the trestle bridge there. And we're trying to make sure we have the turnout thrown the right way. Here's some pictures of the prototype and what we're trying to emulate here at Wholesome Cement. There's some more work that I'm going to try and do on the highway bridge. They still need to put in some piers for the highway bridge, and then the railings, which are actually concrete railings. That's the biggest change from pre-flood to post-flood. I'm going to do it pre-flood, so it's going to be the more the older style. I'm going to use my hand for uncoupling. Usually we have an uncoupling pick that we use. All right, so we just dropping off the empties here, and we're going to go ahead and pick up the loads. Now, one thing that the Wholesome switcher will need to do is pull the empties through the loading facility and stop for each car to get loaded. And however long, the person wants to take for loading each car is flexible, depending on how accurate they want to be. Notice I threw the turnout with a push button there, so no longer need to do that by hand. So this is the loading facility, and the Wholesome Cement's going to have loading facilities for the railroad cars, and then also loading facilities for trucks. So I'm just going to pull them through here, but normally you would have to stop for each one to give it time to load. But since I'm doing this on video, I'm just going to go ahead and pull them so get an idea of what operations is like. Now there will be some sorting that will have to be done also as you decide which of the loaded cars are destined for the next train and which one are not destined for the next trains. There's basically, for each session, there's 2 trains that stop here. So you would not put all the loaded cars out here. Usually it's 3 to 5 cars that are picked up and dropped off. So we'll go ahead and put all 5 of these cars for the next train. So there's some sorting that's being done, and you have to do this for 2 trains. So it definitely is a little bit more involved than what I'm showing you here right now, but you get an idea of how things go. Alright, so this is a turnout, again, that turnout there that was just thrown is outside the control point. So those 2 turnouts, actually this turnout here and then the turnout that goes onto the main line, the Wholesome cement switcher can operate that one if it gets time and track from the dispatcher. But otherwise, it can be used and thrown. The ones inside the control point have to be operated by the dispatcher. So it just gives you a little bit of idea of the operations that can take place here. Looking forward to getting more of this done as we go on. I hope everybody has a great Thanksgiving coming up and a great holidays. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. Appreciate your viewership, and I appreciate your support of this channel. Have a great week, everyone. Take care.